Hi everyone, this is the third in the series of In the Fox's Den, and I'm really pleased to say that today we have the award-winning Belfast photographer and filmmaker Michael Donald, and he has been working with me for a few years now on a project called Goal, Brazil to Brazil, and it is my great pleasure to introduce him to you. Hi,
Hey
Michael.
everybody. Hello.
So, first of all, always ask this question: How are you getting on how are you getting on in lockdown, mate?
Well, it's been weird. I mean, yeah, it's been very strange. The biggest issue I think that we have is just the uncertainty in terms of, I mean, sort of personally, I'm down by the seaside in St. Leonard's, my kids, which is great. Professionally, work-wise, it's just the uncertainty of the horizon. But in terms of the day to day, I'm grateful. I spend the time with my kids. I swim in the sea every day. I can't complain.
Yeah, I think a lot of people are finding good and bad about
Yeah,
this period of our lives. So hopefully, the time that you're spending with your kids is good, and the work is going to be there for people like you when we come out of it anyway. So, give us a little bit about your background, Michael, because I started working with you when I was at Getty Images, and you've done some amazing work. Anybody who goes onto your website, and we'll put the links up by the recording. Anyone that goes onto your website will see some great pictures of the Rolling Stones as well as this project. So, how did you get started?
well, I mean, I'm 53 now. I've been a photographer for well, since my early 20s. I'm from Belfast, and I was massively influenced by when I was young by Don McCullen's sort of journalistic photojournalism stories, especially the Sunday Times. And for me then, what was local news was also national news. So watching someone like Don McCullen tell stories about what was not quite on my doorstep, but not far off it, sort of just really stayed with me. So yeah, I sort of knew. I didn't do anything about it, but I knew from quite early on I wanted to be a photographer.
Yeah, and of course I met you when I was at Getty Images, and you did this wonderful project that you spent 7 years on, which we're going to talk about today, which at the time was an ESPN documentary, which was, I believe, had the very long title of "I Scored a Goal in a World Cup Final," which I guess is what it said. It does what it says on the tin.
I thought I thought it was a very imaginative title.
So from that, though, came a collection, a wonderful collection, which I have had the pleasure to work with you on, of what we then called Brazil to Brazil, because it was all the goal scorers, or the living goal scorers, in World Cup finals at the time that that you were working on this project. But it took about 7 years, didn't it?
Yeah, I mean, the original idea came around. I mean, to be honest, as a photographer, I'm always doing half the time I do what I'm told, or I try to do what I'm told, and the other half the time I sort of do my own stuff. And so you've always got ideas bubbling away. And I think I was looking into researching a story about football managers in England, and I just came across the number of you know, I just looked into how many. I wonder how many people have ever scored a goal in the World Cup final. And at the time, I probably would have guessed hundreds. And I actually know that's what most people would guess, because I've asked most people guess between 200 and 300. At the time, it was 58. There was only 58 people had ever scored a goal in the World Cup final. And at that time, there was only 34 people alive on planet Earth that could hold their hand and say, I scored a goal in the World Cup final. So sort of like an idiot, the next thing is like, right, I want to go meet them all. And so that's why it took so long.
And how many countries did you end up going to?
I think we have counted. I think it was 13 in the end.
13 different countries.
Yeah.
And we called this Brazil to Brazil because how it worked out with the 34 footballers that appear in this project. The first one was I'm going to say this wrong. Alcides Gizia.
Gizia, yeah.
Yeah, he scored for Uruguay, and he was the oldest living person at the time in his 90s, who scored in the World Cup final in Brazil in 1950.
Yeah.
And then we ended with Mario Götze, who scored in the Brazilian World Cup of 2014. So Brazil to Brazil was a nice title for the actual collection. But the pictures that you took, you went a little bit further, didn't you? And you actually took the pictures in places that meant something to that player at the time of the time they scored that goal.
Yeah, well, I mean, you could just do portraits of people, but for me, I mean, also in terms of the interviews we did, it was important that that I was much more interested in the person. I was much more interested in the person and the personal story than I was in the actual goal. And I wanted, in the interviews and the photographs in the film so that people would look at the photographs and read the interviews and have some tiny insight into what it might feel like to score a goal in the World Cup final. Because you can you can talk about the goal and the technicalities and the football of the goal, or you can actually go, what did you have for breakfast that day, or whatever. So to support that idea, you very much want to have photographs that say something about the individual, that put them as sort of almost normal person in some sort of context. So the picture says something about them that contributes to the story.
Well, that's what first attracted me to this, Michael, because it was the most personal account that I'd seen that went very well with the actual pictures. So there was a background story on every picture that you took. I've got a copy of the book here, Goal, and people can see inside it. It's an absolutely beautiful book, which was published by Hachette, by Octopus, which is part of the Hachette group. And we worked very, very hard to make it a FIFA official product. And when it was launched, it got given away in goodie bags at the Kremlin, didn't it, Michael? Do you want to talk
well, interestingly, I mean, the books were beautiful, and they did a wraparound with the Kremlin on it, and they put little gold pins in at the top of the Jules Rimet Trophy in the current World Cup. And whenever I asked FIFA, could I have a copy, they said they hadn't got any spare ones, so I don't have one.
I know, yeah, we both tried, didn't we? Didn't get anywhere, bless them. But going back to the stories of the players, there were some amazing stories. I think it was Dick Naninga.
Well, interestingly, I mean, for me, it was almost by luck. Dick Naninga was the first one. He was the first person we approached and the first person who agreed to do it. And in terms of painting a picture of...
we should say that he scored for Holland.
He scored for Holland in 1978, yeah.
1978 final, yeah.
Yeah. He's actually the only, just thinking about this, he's the only Dutch player to have scored in open play in a World Cup final. So whenever we went to meet him, he was living in Belgium, and he was a bathroom salesman and loved his job and sort of saw football as sort of something he'd done in a previous life. And we did the interview and did the shoot. And actually, during the course of the interview, I said to him, and we actually had this on camera, I said to him, have you still got your medal? And he's like, yeah. And he sort of asked his wife, would she go and find it? She went up, she couldn't find it. She came back about 15 minutes later, and she handed him this box about this size. And he's like, oh yeah, thanks. And he opens the box, and he's like, he's about to show it to the camera, and he goes, oh no. And then he hands back to his wife, and he says something in Dutch, and I'm like, what's up? And what he'd done was he had his World Cup medal in the box, and he really liked the box, and he wasn't so keen on his World Cup medal. So he took his World Cup medal out and put in a medal that he'd won for singing a karaoke competition, and he thought that was appropriate. And it was like, and then after we'd done the interview and the shoot and everything, we went down to his local. He said, "Let's go to the pub." So we just walked down. He lived in a tiny village in Belgium, and walked down to his local pub. And we were in entourage. We were like my crew. We were probably, I think, 6 or 7 people. And we went in. We were there with Dick, and the landlady knew him well or whatever. And she was sort of, like I said, it's a little small village, and the landlady said, she said to me whenever I said, "What are you all doing here?" And I said, "Oh, we're here because it's Dick." And she was like, "Oh, what's Dick done now?" And I told her that Dick had scored a goal in the 1978 World Cup final, and she didn't believe me. He'd been going to that pub every day, every other day, every weekend for probably 10, 15 years. And he'd never mentioned the fact that he scored a goal in the World Cup final. And that was exactly the kind of story we were after.
Am I right in thinking that he also tried to sell bathrooms to you and the film crew?
Yeah, no. I mean, he was really, he was really into the bathrooms. He was very.
As far as he was concerned, that's what he was now.
Yeah. He was a salesman.
There's also a great story. There's a fantastic picture that you've taken of Boninsegna of Italy at the end of a jetty. I'd love you to tell that story, because that's one of those remarkable unknown World Cup stories.
Yeah, I mean that's it. I mean, the other thing that the line of inquiry I wanted to take in doing the interviews was, I mean, with so many of the players like Pele and Jeff Hurst, who now do so much after dinner speaking, and they do it incredibly well, but it's so polished and so well delivered that in order to deliver the stories of their World Cup experience, they don't actually have to go back into their memory. They can just sort of lift it off the shelf. And I was always very keen to have a line of inquiry that would require them to actually go back in their memory. And with Boninsegna, we actually met him the night before the shoot. His best friend was in a restaurant. We went out for dinner in the restaurant the night before, and we got talking. And Boninsegna told us this story that him and the guy who, so this is 1970 Italy. I think he scored the first goal. So he scored the only Italian goal in the 1970 World Cup final. And then obviously the rules have changed now, but whenever you took out a squad, if you had an injury or whatever, you could replace a player. The rules have changed, you can't do that anymore. But the Italian team had gone, and Boninsegna hadn't been selected. He was off for the summer. So him and the guy whose restaurant we were in, he told us this story that they were out fishing. They were out fishing for the day, and we're going to have barbecue and whatever, and all these plans. And I can't remember which Italian players. One of the Italian players got injured, and they got a call. So the wife took the call from Mexico to say, such and such is injured. We need Boninsegna to get on a plane, get to Mexico tomorrow. And she went into a flat, she knew the lake he was on, drove down to the lake, ran out on this jetty, and she could see him out in the boat with his mate, and she's waving at him. And he's just thought, I don't know what she wants. Let's just ignore it. And he wouldn't come in until the very end of the day. And whenever he eventually came in, he didn't believe her, and then eventually, he got the call and whatever. So I said to him, is that Luca? And he said yes. So we went down and we took the photograph on the jetty the next morning, which I really love that photograph.
It's easy to forget there were no mobile phones around at that time.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
The communication from the World Cup itself would have been very different. Okay, I'm going to get you to tell one more story, and that is the story of the oldest person that's in the collection, Gigia, and the 1950 World Cup, because that really, really is an amazing story.
Yeah, well, interestingly, the Gigia story sort of personifies, to my mind, how the whole story is made. Sorry, Ben, can you be quiet? Sorry, my son's having lunch here.
That shows it's done in one take.
Yeah, no, it's fine. Sorry. So the idea behind the whole thing of the whole idea. Whenever I pitched the idea to people, was that you're in some far-flung land, and you see this old bloke on the corner of a bar or restaurant. And your mate says, "Oh, see that old guy over there? He scored a goal in the World Cup final," and you sort of don't believe, and then you go over and talk to him. And Gage sort of did that for us. He scored the winning goal, what's sort of the winning goal in the 1950 World Cup in the Maracanã against Brazil. And he was playing for Uruguay, and the Uruguayan delegation were so sure that that Uruguay were going to lose that most of them had left town the previous night. They'd gone home. They didn't even go to the final. So whenever Geisha went out, whenever they went into the Maracanã, it's the largest crowd that's ever attended a football match in history. There was 200,000 people at it. If you can imagine 200,000 people at a football match, it's sort of, and every single one of them was Brazilian. So whenever Geisha scored the winning goal, he said there was silence. He said it was absolutely terrifying. And then so it went in, and then whenever they so they won the World Cup, they did the lap of honor, and he said the lap of honor was weird because again it was silence and everybody was in tears. So I mean, Brazil still haven't recovered from the loss of that World Cup, but they went back to the hotel and they thought, right, party time. But the amongst the delegation that had left town the previous night was the treasurer of the Uruguayan team. So it transpired they had no money. So they went up to one of their hotel rooms and had a whip around amongst them, like just sort of cash, and sent somebody out to buy some sandwiches and some tins of beer, and brought that back, and they celebrated winning the World Cup with some takeaway sandwiches, tins of beer in the room. And they were also too scared to go into town because they thought they'd get beaten up.
I'm guessing that's very different to the way that World Cup wins are celebrated now.
Yeah. Well, that was the other thing that was really important. Is I think the narrative arc covers time, and it ends up. We finished with Götze, who is a really delightful, and Iniesta, who are really delightful young multimillionaires. But the arc of the story in the book sort of shows how that changes over time.
Yeah, I think that it was good to finish it when you did, because we could have, as we've talked about so many times, gone on doing this every 4 years. But I think you talk about that narrative arc, and I think from 1950, which was the first of the modern World Cups, really. Obviously, they started in 1930. There wasn't going to be anybody living anyway that could have been in this. But 1950 and post-war, the World Cup was very different, wasn't it? And now when you look at, as you say, we've got a lot of multi-millionaires now scoring in the World Cup finals, and those stories are just not going to be as interesting. And the backstories are incredibly important for this. So, Michael, it started off with the ESPN documentary, which is how it all happened anyway. You and I came together when I was at Getty Images, and I think it had been at that point really just sold as 5 pages in a Sunday supplement. But there was so much more to this. So there is an actual collection of the pictures, and there were only ever 6 fully signed sets of the 34 images.
Yeah, whenever you say signed, what I did do whenever we completed the set was I had a set of exhibition print. I actually had 11 done, but the others were broken up into bits, and had those photographs sent out around the world so that each player signed their own photograph, and so they got a copy, and then there's various sort of local people that helped got copies. But in the end, there were 6 complete sets of every single player that was alive for the Brazilian World Cup at the time of the Brazilian World Cup final, and they're all signed by the players themselves.
So we ought to say that of those 6 sets, 1 has been sold to a collector in the UK.
Yeah. So can I just show you a couple of what they look like?
I think
I'm done in lockdown here, so I've only got a couple of them here, but I've got. So this is Sir Jeff Hurst. So this is this interestingly. Sorry, it's a bit dusty. This was so we shot him in the hotel room that he stayed in the night before the World Cup final, and so this is a hotel in Hendon. We took him back to the room he stayed in the night before the final. He hadn't been in the hotel or the room since, and so that's him in that room. He signed it, and then we have a quote of him. So this is how they've been exhibited. Yeah. So I'll just show you the one other one I've got here. Yeah. Sorry. So this is obviously Pele. So he gets 2 windows because he scored in 2 World Cup finals. So this is what they look like, yeah, and they're all signed by the players. So sorry, that's just to give you a couple. That's the only examples I've got.
That's great, and it's worth saying as well that we've had this collection on show. It's been on show at what was called the Proud Archivist. Then it was 8 months in Hotel Football. It's been up at Holborn Studios. And also during the World Cup, it was on display at Stowers of London in Savile Row. So we've had it up in a few places as a collection. Of the 6 sets, 1 of them has been sold, but the other 5 are still available.
Hang on, sorry. I'm keeping one.
You're keeping one. There are 4 still available, which people can. I'll put the link on there. But if people are interested in buying a set, if they've got room for 34 pictures of that size in their lounge, that would be great. But maybe in a boardroom or in maybe by their swimming pool. Then they can contact me on those. And certainly now that it's down to only 4. And it's worth saying as well that of those 34 that were alive at the time that you took these pictures, I think 5 of them or 6 of them are away now.
It was bizarre because whenever we initially finished the project, I mean, obviously Geisha, who is one of those 5, who's quite old, and then in a period of about, I think it was about 3 weeks, 3 of them died in one go, and then but yeah, I mean, sadly, that's just going to keep happening. That's inevitable.
Yeah, and obviously one of the scorers that we've lost recently is Martin Peters, which now leaves Jeff Hurst as the only living English goal scorer in a World Cup final, or indeed British goal scorer in a World Cup final. So then, of course, we spent a couple of years getting FIFA on board and turning this into the great book Goal, which became a FIFA licensed product, which was brilliantly produced by Oxbus Hachette, I must say. And I think you've got...
Or the Russian, this is Russian?
The Russian.
So it was done with the Russian World Cup. This is the Russian World Cup.
Yeah.
And the French one, this is the French
brilliantly
version.
Called Boot.
Yeah. And then this is my, let me see what's in here. Yeah, so this is my copy of Goal, which is signed by Jeff Hurst. So
yeah, well, my copy's signed by you, so so I'm keeping that one. Now, one of the reasons that we're doing this broadcast now, because obviously we've worked on this for a number of years, but it's worth saying that this month is the anniversary of what arguably is the greatest football team of all time, which was that Brazil side of 1970. And that was an amazing final between, I remember seeing it. I was, I believe I was 11 at the time, but I remember that fantastic goal from Carlos Alberto, which gets shown over and over again. And of course, all the pictures that you've got from that time, included Pele and included Jairzinho, and it really is worth celebrating. I think the 50th anniversary.
Yeah, I mean, I actually think there's endless debates and pantheons about this and whatever. I know, obviously, I've watched every World Cup final many times in the course of researching this book, and I think they're all right. I think it was the greatest World Cup final. I think it probably was the greatest World Cup final team, that Brazil 1970 team. And I think Carlos Alberto's goal, the fourth goal, is probably my favorite World Cup final goal.
Mine too. Is timeless.
But also not just because it's him, and he's a 25-year-old captain of that team. But if you watch it from the beginning, you know, it's a team goal. You know, Pele told us that he well, it was actually Carlos Alberto told us that Zagallo, the manager, had said, you know, if they're attacking in the left, then go down the right wing. And if you watch that goal again, when Pele puts the pass out for Carlos Alberto at a snail's pace, which Eric Cantona described as reading a Rimbaud poem, he puts it out at a snail's pace. Before he kicks the ball, he doesn't look behind him. He just knows Carlos Alberto's coming. So if you watch that goal, it is the greatest World Cup final goal of all time.
Yeah, I mean, there have been...
So Sunday, 21st of June, 50 years ago this month.
Okay, we will... We'll have a glass of wine together on that day, because it definitely should be celebrated. And it's also worth saying, because all these links are going to be with this broadcast, Michael, but it's worth saying that this book is still available on Amazon. And Father's Day is coming up.
Yeah.
So
I don't think I'll be getting a copy, but
blatant bit of advertising. but it's a fantastic book. It would make a fantastic Father's Day present. And it's worth saying as well that during lockdown, a lot of the players that are in this book are now being seen. There's a lot of football fans that are watching archive football on television during this time, and finding that a lot of it is better than
in the absence of live sport. I mean, I think it's also interesting for, you know, our kids, for the younger generation, to actually see where the modern game came from.
And it's captured so well within this book. Michael, thank you very much for this.
Thank you very much.
As I say, all the links are going to be with this broadcast. Anybody who's interested in actually buying a set can contact me directly. If you are interested in buying the book, especially with Father's Day coming up, just go onto Amazon, and I'll put that link on there as well, because they've got a couple left, I think. So so let's make sure that they sell out. Michael, thanks very much. I know that you're in a beautiful place during lockdown. So everybody that I'm interviewing seems to be either by a park or by the sea. So
I'm very grateful.
I think everybody.
And thank you, Rick.
Coming. My pleasure. Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Stay safe.
Yeah. Thank you.